So I don't know whether or not this video is real because on the internet everyone can claim to be Santa Claus, but let's assume that it is. It shows a communist talking with a conservative and finding common ground. So let's see how it goes.
In order to stop the communist agenda, we need to get rid of the big banks.
Right.
Karl Marx, no one knew who he was until the big banks distributed all of his literature.
Right.
Yeah. So in order to get rid of communism, we need to get rid of the big banks.
Yeah.
Get rid of big pharma.
Right.
What else? Big tech.
So just because a conservative agrees with some of the points that Karl Marx has doesn't mean that he is for communism. For example, I agree with the fact that Karl Marx said under no circumstance should the workers be disarmed. So Karl Marx was incredibly pro-Second Amendment. But that doesn't mean that I agree with other things that he said. In fact, you can agree with a lot of the problems that Karl Marx has noticed in his literature, but I vehemently disagree with the concept of abolishing private property. And I think that is absolutely essential for a person to become a communist. And it's the abolition of private property that I have the biggest problem with. Now, the United States and many other nations, they're not capitalist nations, although the left wants you to believe that. No, the United States is a mixed economy. And it's a system where when the rich manage to make a profit, they get to keep their profits, which is fine. But when they fail, they get bailouts from the taxpayer. So they have socialism for the rich and the worst type of capitalism for the poor. Meaning that if you have a small mom and pop shop and you go bankrupt, there's no bailout for you. Like, no one is going to help you. But if you're a $1 trillion hedge fund and you go bankrupt, then you get a bailout. And then during the pandemic, we also noticed that the mom and pop stores were forcefully closed for their own safety. However, the big businesses, they were allowed to remain open. And there is that very disgusting situation where I believe it was a lady from California who had her restaurant shut down because, my God, the pandemic, right? It's going to kill people. But literally next to the street, another restaurant was open because they were filming a movie there. And of course, Hollywood was an essential business. I don't know why. I guess like the actors and their health isn't that important, right? Like they can go to a restaurant. And they weren't even wearing masks because they were shooting a movie, right? So this is so abhorrent that conservatives are looking at this and they're disgusted. And they're like, well, this is not the way a country should be run. The left is looking at this and they're disgusted and they're like, oh, well, the big banks are profiting and late-stage capitalism and rah. So they're both agreeing there is a problem. The difference is the solution. The right-wingers, the conservatives, they would want that the rich be treated the same and like not play by different rules, while the left would say, no, we want communism and that's going to fix it. So just because two people notice the problem, that doesn't mean that they're part of the same ideology, because at the end of the day, the solution is what matters. And I don't think like this gentleman would agree with the solution given by this guy.
Tech.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's like
like these like landlords that like are coming in and buying like hundreds of properties. You don't even know what
right.
corporation.
China is doing it, and Bill Gates.
Zillow.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people.
I don't know why communists pretend that every single conservative is the most extreme caricature version of a libertarian you can imagine, to the point where they're ANCAPs, because that's not the case. I mean, they are, you want to break big tech, therefore you're not a conservative. Oh, that means you want communism. The railway barons, hundreds of years ago, were also broken up, and they weren't broken up by communists. They were broken up, well, I guess by people that by today's standards, you would consider them to be hyper-conservative. I mean, if you take any business, like the pharmaceutical company, you're going to see that there are so many regulations and so many rules. Many of them are passed by conservatives. I don't know where this idea that conservatives are ANCAPs came from, and that every single time a conservative wants to regulate something, then it goes against his values. But it's completely not true. Secondly, the concept of China and Bill Gates buying a lot of land. First of all, I feel like we have this legislation in Romania where it says that a foreign entity cannot buy land in our country. So if you're an American, for example, you're not allowed to buy land. You can rent. You can hire some Romanians to run a business for you. You can, again, rent the space for your business, but you can't literally buy the land. And I think this is a very good legislation to have, because if you look at what happened with Australia, they sold a lot of their shit to the point where China pretty much owes them. I mean, they own their water supply, if I'm not mistaken. They own their energy sector. They're in a very bad situation because they just allowed a foreign nation to buy their land. Another similar situation is in London, where many people are complaining, and rightfully so, due to the increasing price of rent. Now, in London, you have Qatar and China that have bought entire buildings, and they just keep them waiting for the prices to go up so they can sell them later and make a profit. Obviously, this is a problem. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. You shouldn't just be able, like if you're a rich Saudi prince, you shouldn't be able to just buy an apartment building and you have no intention of renting it or allowing people to live in it, and then just flip it over for a profit. Like that definitely is not a good idea to allow people to do that. And I don't see why a person wouldn't be a conservative if they said, yeah, this is not good for the economy, this is not good for the people here, we should put an end to that. Like, if you want to buy buildings, if you want to buy land in our country, you need to get citizenship in order to do so. And then it's the question of Bill Gates, right? Because Bill Gates isn't a foreigner, like he's an American and he's buying a lot of land. Well, again, it's the government intervention. Like, the government shut down businesses during COVID. Many businesses went bankrupt. And now they are selling those businesses, and you have rich investors like Bill Gates buying those businesses cheap. And people like Bill Gates, they were allowed to keep their businesses open during the pandemic because they were considered essential. And now they can buy all of these things cheaper. And of course, he was one of the people that were promoting the government shutting down businesses. So in a way, there is a huge conflict of interest there. And of course, the government is passing other things such as climate change policies. Like here in Europe, we have the zero emission policies, and we can see what's happening to the farmers in the Netherlands and in other places where, because of government intervention, they're unable to farm food anymore. So what are they going to do? Oh, they're going to sell the land. Who's going to buy it? Oh, people like Bill Gates, right? So I don't see why a conservative would support that. Like, you have the government intervention, which is causing the problem.
People here are very fed up, and they're ready to collectivize and sort of seize the means of production.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's why I support unions so much. You know,
Well,
you wanna-
it's funny. I work for actually not this shirt, the other shirt I had an earlier, for a company not too far from here called Liberty Pump, non-union. They let the owners of the company sold a third of the company to the employees. So the employees have ownership of it, which is a lot better. And
Well, they're collectivizing.
right,
It's cooperative.
it's an ESOP.
Yeah, the workers own the means of
And then
production.
their families work there, their dad, the sons work there, and that's typically where America started. A lot of families did that.
So this is another thing where, oh, the guy supports his company, which is a co-op, and the workers own it, and therefore he's a communist. That's clearly not the case. The problem here is the voluntary action, right? Like, if a company wants to sell its stuff to the workers, then by all means, it should be able to. The problem that conservatives have is when it would be mandatory, when every single company would have to do that. And that's where it would become a problem. Now, you live in an age where you have computers, where you're able to crowdfund. There's literally nothing stopping people from getting together with a business idea and starting their own co-op. Like 20, 30, 40 people, if they all start their own GoFundMe with a business idea, they can live their communist dream. Nothing stopping them. The argument from communists, and I believe Vosh has this argument as well, is that big banks do not want to lend money to co-ops. I don't know why. Maybe there's a conspiracy or something, but You don't need the banks. Again, you live in the age of Kickstarter. You live in the age of GoFundMe. You don't have to start something big. You can start a small company. If you think they're that successful, and if you think the workers are having such a great time in these environments, what's stopping you? I mean, literally, what's stopping you? And it's also the fact that most communists don't even understand how capitalism works, especially when they're saying, oh, well, the workers do not own the means of production. There's nothing stopping the workers from buying stocks at the companies they work under. In fact, many workers actually do. And sure, maybe they can't get the stocks from Google and own the company. But like, if you're in a smaller company, chances are you can actually do that. Like, if you speak with other workers, you can pitch money together and you can then buy enough stocks from the company so that the workers have a spot on the board. And if it's a small or medium-sized company and there's a lot of workers, then chances are they can actually own the company themselves. Like, it's not something that can't be done. And there are cases where this has been achieved. In fact, the concept of buying stocks for activist purposes even exists. There were environmentalists which pitched money together, created GoFundMe and created various other things where they bought stocks at oil companies, and then they forced the oil companies to adopt various environmentalist policies that didn't benefit the profits of the company, but they were done because the environmentalists, the activists, started buying shares. Again, like, most communists don't even understand this concept. You know, and when I say most communists, I mean people on Twitter, you know, that just like to bitch and complain. So all in all, yeah, sure. I mean, there are a lot of issues that both right-wingers and left-wingers agree, but the solutions are entirely different. Right? Like, the solutions for the communists are authoritarian. Like, they want to force your company to become owned by the workers. They want to force other people to live life that they want to choose. Meanwhile, the conservatives, they don't want that. They just want the government to just fuck off and live companies alone. Stop shutting down businesses. Stop having policies that are hurting the farmers. Stop deciding which business is essential and which one isn't. Right? Like, that's what they would prefer. Stop giving taxpayer money as bailouts to companies when they fuck up. That's what conservatives want. This is kind of like me going to a communist and being like, hey, do you want to tax the rich? And he goes like, yes. And I'm like, well, that's what Steve Bannon wants to do. You're just like a conservative, aren't you? Let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will find you in the comments section. Take care.